Morning. Another day, another real-world test. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We're doing it on the Sigma BF, the new very minimalistic camera from Sigma. And right now I am on a trip with Spotify. This isn't sponsored or anything, they just paid for travel and they're giving us a tour of their headquarters. But I figured, what better place to test out this minimalist camera than in a country known for its minimalist design? We're in Stockholm, Sweden. And as per the usual, we will explore all while we test out this camera. But first things first.
Coffee. Check. Fish is still in my shot. He's still in my shot. Come here. Jenna's in the shot. This is what happens when you get a bunch of us together. Coffee. Check. Tommy.
Coffee, spicy, check.
Coffee, spicy, check.
Excellent.
Take 10. Coffee. Check.
And as mentioned, we're at Spotify's HQ here in Stockholm. Now we first signed into our Spotify accounts and were given awards based on specific use cases. I won listening to the same song the most because I listen to white noise a lot when I'm working. Then we got to hear from Gustav Soderstrom, the co-president and CTO of Spotify, where he gave us an interesting history lesson on Sweden and why Spotify is from here.
There are some very good reasons for why Spotify happened in Sweden and nowhere else, like in America or somewhere where there was a much bigger music market.
From the socialist heritage creating high-speed internet access for everyone very early on.
And there were these investments in things like PC for everyone, where you could buy one PC per family at a very big discount. So basically everyone in Sweden had a PC very early.
To a word that I will not try to pronounce.
This word is very dear to Swedes. It means the principle of public access. Actually, anyone in Sweden can just come and camp out on my lawn. Like, everyone has access to all the land. Even if someone owns it and paid for it, everyone has access.
But this also pertains to digital things and all information basically, which is why the Pirate Bay, the program along with Napster and others that allowed people to share files including music for free with one another, happened in Sweden. So Spotify came out in 2006 and it needed to be better than free piracy. They did this by allowing people to stream the songs instantly instead of having to wait to download them. So you could basically have all of Pirate Bay instantly. They also monetized it for creators with ads, and then later on with subscriptions, which is now the majority of their revenue. He then showed us some new features for the future that I can't share yet, unfortunately, but will on social later on. After that, we heard from Veronica Hart, the global comms director at Spotify, and Sten Garmark, the vice president of consumer experience, discussing how video on the platform is actually increasing engagement for a lot of podcasters. And then we got a tour of Spotify's music studio here, and some of us with better voices than myself got to record backup vocals to a song to show how the studio works. And my friend Joshua Vergara showed off his piano skills. Okay, while he's playing, let's talk about the camera's very polarizing design. Personally, and I think most of the people I show it to, seem to love the look of it. It's made out of a single block of aluminum that has been milled down over 9 hours. It comes in black and silver, but the silver for me definitely steals the show. And actually it was co-designed with Sigma by the Stockholm Design Lab, which happens to be a few blocks away from Spotify's headquarters. Now because of the single block, it's heavier than I expected it to be, but it's not heavy, I would say. It just surprises you when you hold it for the first time. And as mentioned, it's meant to be a minimalist camera, quote, stripped to the essence and balances performance with simplicity and returns the focus of what matters most, your photographs. Now, we'll get to how well it delivers on that in a bit, but first let's talk a little bit more about the design. There is only one lug strap, so they expect you to use a wrist strap, but you can, like I have, add a tripod mount to the bottom to get a full crossbody strap. There is no flip-out screen, there's no EVF, and other than the entire metal case, we have a rubberized bottom, which is nice, so that you don't scratch the camera or whatever surface you set it down on for that matter. You'll also notice that there's no shoe mount, there's no 3.5mm in, and there's no SD card slot. Just a USB-C port and a pretty fast SSD actually inside. Now I personally like the SSD idea myself, as I can tell some of the benefits right away, like the fact that the camera can turn on and off almost instantly, and scrolling through photos and videos is the fastest I've ever seen on a camera. Next up, we retreated to a boat tour on this unusually warm April day here in Stockholm. There was a DJ because, of course, Spotify, and also music-themed drinks because, again, Spotify. Our boat even had its own Spotify code that would load Baller Mix, hilariously. Now, the reason we're on a boat to tour this city a bit is because the central parts of Stockholm are actually made up of 14 islands, which is then part of the rest of the Stockholm archipelago, which itself has some 2,400 islands in it in total. It was built where it was strategically to protect Sweden from sea invasions, and it became an important trade hub as one might expect. The Old Town area is the small island that was the original Stockholm that then grew from there. In fact, the name Stockholm in Swedish comes from stock, which means stake or log, and home, which means small island. It's where the palace, the stock exchange, Supreme Court, the Nobel Museum, and the Stockholm Cathedral are all located. Now, while we're heading out east on this leisurely route, let's talk about some of what it's like to actually shoot on this Sigma BF. Firstly, the display in the back, even though it doesn't tilt, is very sharp and clear. I did have to turn the brightness up all the way in bright sunlight, but with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 times when light was just too harsh, for the most part, I can still see it. Now, even though it's a touchscreen, it's limited in what you can use touch input for. You can tap to track focus on something, like you would on your phone, which works pretty well actually, and the autofocus itself is actually pretty impressive. And you can use the pressure-sensitive shutter button to focus and shoot with the electronic-only shutter, as you'd expect. The only other controls are this wheel that is also a D-pad with a button in the center. And then we have our power button, which you can long press to turn the camera on and off. Or you can tap it to put it to sleep, and then wake it with pushing it again or pushing the shutter. Now, I'm not sure why you would put it to sleep like this. I just turned it off because it's so fast to just turn back on, but maybe there's some difference in the battery drain depending on which one you do. Not sure. Then we have 2 haptic buttons. So when the camera is off, they don't actually do anything because they're not actual buttons. But when it's on, you can tap them and they properly do feel like buttons, even though it's just a subtle vibration. But because of that, you can push the play button to get to the playback gallery, but you can also lightly rest your finger on that button to just quickly see the last photo you took. And same for the larger button, which gets into the system settings, or you can lightly rest on it to get some info at the top of the screen. Beyond that, you can half press the shutter, and while holding it half pressed, the wheel defaults to exposure compensation. All of that is actually pretty clever. Now, here is where things start to set people off. In general, there's nothing on the screen while shooting. Not until you push the center button, and then you will see the dual layer menu at the top and bottom of the display. You can then use the D-pad or wheel to move through them and push the center button to enter that option and use the D-pad or wheel to then change it. But instead of doing this, we also have this mini screen that displays these exact same options, and you can use the D-pad to cycle through them and the wheel to change them from there as well. Idea being that it leaves the screen to just be what you're taking a photo of. We have the usual ISO, shutter, aperture, exposure compensation, RAW, JPEG or shoot in both, white balance, autofocus settings, and capture mode, which includes intervals, burst, and is also where you would switch over to video, which we'll talk about more later. But then there is one for aspect ratio, which is kind of cool, and it affects the JPEG version only when shooting in JPEG plus RAW, as well as a section for 13 different film simulations that also only affect the JPEG, of course. From the standard to warm gold, teal and orange, monochrome, and a bunch of others. You can also click into these and make some adjustments to them, and those stay that way even if you turn the camera off and back on again. But sadly, there's no way to save extra custom ones or even rearrange them. Okay, we'll talk more about the good and bad I found from all of this minimalist uniqueness in a sec. But right now, we're docking at one of the islands for dinner, apparently. I wasn't expecting this. This is a 2 Michelin-starred restaurant, Era, which is overlooking a harbor. We're starting off with champagne, which my friend Tommy, aka Gadgets Boy, decided to open one of the bottles of and begin to serve people, while also making for a great advertisement for the champagne. Then, we're handed various small bites while we're outside. I think I counted 4 or so. And that included things like this nori tartlet with beef tartare and trout roe, to give you an idea. And eventually, we were moved inside for the remaining 8 or so next dishes that were all made from local ingredients, like this diver scallops with blue mussels, oysters, caviar, and kohlrabi dashi poured over it. Then grilled monkfish, mustard and sherry, and a copious amount of black truffle on top. And the dish that was hilariously the most divisive with a lot of the crew here was a small piece of pigeon, along with a morel stuffed with more pigeon, made with sake and black currant, and a sauce also made from pigeon. I loved it, but a lot of others had a very hard time not picturing the pigeons walking around all of our respective cities. Now on top of that, there was also wine pairings that as soon as you got down to a certain level, were immediately refilled by the servers. photographers. So I just had to stop drinking, so they would just stop giving me more at some point. But it was an incredible meal and just a fun time with all of the creators and Spotify people that I am very thankful for getting the chance to have done. Now, speaking of divisive, let's talk about some of the things I like and don't like about this camera. Firstly, the sensor is a full frame 24.6 megapixel sensor, and when paired with these Sigma lenses, it is plenty sharp for me, and actually, as you can tell from some of the photos in this video, shots can look amazing straight out of the camera as a JPEG with no editing. Video, on the other hand, is clearly an afterthought. We have 6K 30, which uses the entire sensor, but there's no in-body stabilization in this camera at all. There is electronic stabilization, and as soon as you turn that on, it drops you down to 4K, and it crops the sensor a decent amount, and even with that, it's not amazing as you would expect. Now, adding in some stabilization in post, like I did here in DaVinci Resolve, helps, so it's not totally lost, but any videographer would not want to rely on editing stabilization, I imagine. And we do have the option to also shoot in log for better color grading in post, which is nice. Another thing is the battery. It's a new Sigma design and it's super slim, but it isn't great battery life-wise. I was able to get about 187 shots on the battery with a few video clips here and there, so not terrible, but not great. And again, if you're using more video, then that'd make things a lot worse. I was able to recharge it using this little battery pack on the boat earlier, but I'd probably recommend buying at least one extra battery. Now, I don't mind the internal storage, and again, I think it has its benefits in terms of speed, like I said, but I do wish there was an app for offloading photos to my phone a bit easier. I did find, though, that using a USB-C cable, I can plug in and pull photos off that way, but it just means you need to now carry around that cable. The plus side, though, I guess, is that, well, most camera apps suck, so a give and take, I guess. I do like the way that it automatically organizes all of the photos and footage into daily folders. It just makes things a lot easier to find later on. At the end of the day, as you've probably heard by now from another review of this camera maybe, the name BF stands for Beautiful Foolishness. And it's a line from the Book of Tea from 1906 by Akakura Kakuzo, in which he attempts to translate the tea spirit of the East to a culture caught up in opulent materialism. The line is, quote, "Let us dream of evanescence and linger in the beautiful foolishness of things," end quote. Taken as this sort of slow down, be present, and take wonder at the spontaneous ridiculousness that is the world around you. And it's this sort of mantra that Sigma carries through their copy about the camera, even with lines like, quote, "It is designed to accompany you throughout your day and to capture the spontaneous beauty of everyday life." End quote. Now, I don't know if this camera actually is any better at doing that than any other small camera, but something did happen when I started to let the BF sort of retrain how I take photos on a proper camera like this one. Firstly, I decided that it was best probably left in mostly aperture priority, basically, since I could control that from the ring of the lens. I actually feel like a lens with an aperture ring is kind of a must with this camera, by the way. And then I left shutter and ISO on auto, with only adjusting the shutter as needed very occasionally for faster subjects or to remove banding, etc. Then I would move it to the aspect ratio, or the film simulation, and I would adjust those with the wheel as needed pretty quickly. And then just use the half press of the shutter to bring up the exposure compensation, which I used a lot actually because of those other settings being in auto. I'd also touch the screen to focus if the half shutter press wasn't grabbing what I wanted initially. Then I'd have the RAWs if I ever wanted to go and edit at some point, but the JPEGs come out great a lot of the time, especially with the exposure adjustments while shooting. I also feel like this camera sort of could be the camera for people coming from a phone wanting to just get better quality that can be simple enough to use like a phone with, no viewfinder, tapping to focus already, and even easy exposure compensation. And on top of that, it's very pretty, especially the silver, and well built. And something about it makes me want to go shoot with it. It's a similar feeling that I get when I use a Leica Q3, but it's a third of the price, and I can choose what lens I want to use and even swap them out. Now, could you get an arguably more capable camera for the same price, if not less? Absolutely. Should most people buy this camera? Absolutely not. But for some people, it's beautiful, it's a little foolish, but it's also fun, and it makes me want to put it around my shoulder and go for a photo walk. And I kind of find myself wanting one. And there we go, calling it a night. Let me know what you guys thought about this video, about the Sigma BF in the comments below. Always appreciate hearing from you guys. And I am going to call it an early night now because we have another full day tomorrow with Spotify. Good night. Okay, real quick, I'm actually back in New York City, and the video probably should have ended there, maybe. But I have a friend here whose name is Adria, and she's a fantastic photographer. Check out these photos from Cuba where she regularly goes for photo class retreats that she teaches. You can learn more about those if you want on her Instagram. I'll leave the link below. But I didn't know for the longest time that she shot all of these on her iPhone, and then she edits them on her iPad in my coffee shop, Coffee Check, a lot of the time. Now, she's always been saying that she wants a bigger camera that has better quality that she could use to do these shoots, but every time she tries to do that, none of them can like match up to her iPhone and the convenience and the ease of use and all of that. They're never usually worth the extra effort to carry around a big camera when she could just take out her iPhone. But I thought maybe the Sigma BF, maybe this is the person that it is for. So I let her borrow it for a few days.
You shot with the camera now.
Yeah, I shot with it quite a bit this week.
I want to know what you think.
All right, it wasn't what I was expecting because what my mind wanted to do to that camera was make it an iPhone.
Yes.
And the first thing when you feel the weight,
Yeah, you're like, oh.
you're like, no, this isn't
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But it's because there's better glass
Yep.
and a little bit more weight to keep it balanced. And then you're like, all right, this makes sense. So then I was on board. But this is where being on board gets complicated.
Okay.
Because if you're going to be on board with having a heavier camera,
Why have a minimalistic camera if you're going to carry around a camera?
yes, exactly. Be something that's going to compare with the iPhone
Yeah.
and be light and use the screen
Be portable.
and be a little bit better and be absolutely beautiful. But they didn't do that.
It's a confusing camera to everybody, which is why I
Yes.
wanted to like do a review of it because I'm just
Yeah.
like, I don't know who this is for. I thought maybe you might be one of the few people because, as you mentioned before, like you don't care that it doesn't flip out.
Nope.
You actually were happy that there was no eyepiece, which that's the first complaint about from every other person I've handed
Yeah.
it to because an iPhone doesn't have one, right?
Yeah.
So I was kind of wondering like if this translated for
Yeah.
you as like, okay, maybe this is a better thing, but it sounds like you would still just rather use your iPhone.
I would rather use my iPhone.
Because it's just more portable, it's more subtle.
Portable, lighter, faster, more invisible.
Yeah. So but you would carry around the Q3 and use the Q3.
Just the quality of it.
Yeah,
the
it's just really
quality
nice.
of it
Yeah,
is
the glass is
so
good.
beautiful.
And also it's like 60 megapixels and you can
Oh, it's
just crop
unbelievable.
and do whatever
Yes.
you want.
And
with it
then when
after
you're
the
doing
fact.
that, you don't need a zoom lens.
No, correct.
That's it. You need
Correct.
one lens. And because of the megapixels, you can do whatever
Just-
you
yeah,
want
you
with it.
can-
And so if I were to spend the money, that's what I would get. But that's more than I'm going to spend.
Yeah, it's an expensive camera.
Yeah.
I feel like this camera kind of feels maybe in some weird way that it's a cheaper version of the Q3 because you could just get a 24 millimeter lens, put it on there and run around with it.
That's true.
But it sounds like you still wouldn't do that because it's $2,000 versus $6,000.
It's true. A little bit of it is like when I'm shooting with a Leica, you know you're shooting with something that's like so beautiful
Yeah.
and so precious and so like
Yeah. And
there's
has
so
history and
much
this and that,
there.
yeah.
Like that right there to me is valuable, and I'm a sucker for that.
Yeah,
Shiny,
yeah,
you know.
right.
And
It's a luxury item. is
it's a
what it
luxury
is.
item.
Appealing
And
to-
with this
to a person that
camera,
appreciates it.
the beauty of that camera and the beauty of the body and that little place for your thumb to
Yep.
sit. I mean, the beauty of it sways me so much that it's close.
Okay.
I mean, it gets me over there for sure.
So you close,
It's
but not
close.
close enough. I think that's the conclusion then.
Yeah.
This
It's
close.
close. It's close. I
But not
hope to
close
see.
enough.
I hope to see another
Yeah, maybe a
version
new
of
version.
it. And I think that there's going to be people out there that just have such a love for the aesthetic that they don't
They don't
care
care if they're
and
gonna buy it
they'll
anyway.
buy it. And I support them in that 100%. So I love it.
Yeah.
I want them to make me love it more.
Yeah, it's this close,
Please.
but not
Yeah.
close enough.
Yes.
And there you have it. Maybe I was wrong about it being for an iPhone shooter. But Adria has a good point, and that's that its aesthetic does attract someone who might be a potential Leica buyer or just someone who really appreciates luxury items in that way and maybe doesn't want to spend Leica money on it. So maybe it's a camera for people who are just a little foolish about beauty. I have since bought one. But Adria brings up a good point, and that's that it's aesthetic. It's hard to say.